P. Nagigi, thank you very much. And let's welcome Andy Thundercloud.
Ijankishana hinikaragi wait. Ochana de honikit ekchenet. Ons is irachting hingi aangereed. Naga chagu hektenera. Ke aperes niet. Dan ik honigit dat ik tenawida. Chegregi hochank gregunkira. Yat ete du khurukshana. Wajawahara. Ske heske hiret. Oké. Khusak. Nagre, ke, eja, možda ja perez nin. Nunegi waga hajidera, eja, majete hitetera, ja perez hajijed. Nege jigage di hajara, hikhunu negi, možda wahara, jegunkira hitat airet, hi anshara, hi anshwahara, hi uniwahara, hi dekwahara, hi chumiwahara. Ichoke hara, kunika ra, regunkira hit at aired. Naga jigagide, ake wo chechini, regunkira, yat ete du hurugra. Hagureja, huska, eja, hachat. Naga hi koret, huska jera, hochankit ete du hurukshan. Okay, choke hara, homakini heat. Jago heated, I kay up at his name. Then I got kitty carry heater. Chokaga, yagi function. Hey, choka, they change a waji on Jack. Kaga is a agent hachanit yakit. Ah, he cracked a dection. How could they trushke? Huska nag roha egi unakshan. Keni hijan hashtanet. Nunega. Gurejan de ejo washerek tenet. Najige gajaku hi perez naka. Nanki. Ishke heda perezik tenet. Aga choka good. Wank to shejan red. Aske go. Jago hingeshun ura. Hanach kushunut. Nage hintuna wira, eja, mashana nanchkere de keen. Eskega. Ega hampte pay wing a jade, jago chokaga hungirak shunana. Eskega. Oksana de jago shunana. Honigida gikshinawe. Any questions? I speak the Hocak language. Hocak was the first language that I ever learned. When I was younger, when I was a youngster, that's all I ever heard. I was raised by my grandfather, and my grandfather spoke nothing but Hocak. My grandfathers spoke nothing but Hocak. My grandmothers spoke nothing but Hocak. My fathers, my mothers, my uncles, my aunts, my brothers, my sisters. That was all we ever spoke. We didn't speak any English at all. One day there was a man that come to see my grandfather. And I was surprised because I had never seen anyone like this man. He was a little white guy, a little white man. He was short and he wore wire-rimmed glasses. He was balding, just had a little strip of hair on each side. And he came to the door and he asked me, he says, "Little boy, where's your grandfather?" And he was speaking Hocak. And I was somewhat surprised. I didn't know who he was, and so I told him, I said, I'll go get him. So I went and got my grandfather, and he came in the house, and they sat down, and they started visiting. And I left, because I didn't really have any business listening to, what they were going to discuss. And when he left, I went and asked my grandpa, Grandpa, who was that man? What family does he come from? I've never seen anyone like that. And Grandpa just laughed. He just laughed and laughed. And he said, oh, grandson, he said, you've never seen anyone like that. He said, they're what we call maichde. And literally translated, maichde means big knife. So he was referring to the white population. He says, there's many of them in this world. He said, you just haven't seen any of them yet. He said, they have a lot of authority. And there's things that they do, things that they say, that we have to comply with. And he told me, he says, they think that they're pretty smart. They think that they're pretty intelligent. He said, but they don't know anything. They're going to ruin this world. They're going to ruin our life if we let them. And come to find out, that gentleman that came to visit my grandfather was a preacher. I believe he was with the Dutch Reformed Church, and he was working with the people at the Indian Mission, which is located near Black River Falls, Wisconsin. And they had a school. They had a school that was located in Neillsville, Wisconsin. And that's where many children went to. And I won't say privileged, but I was sent to that school. And at that school, we were not allowed to speak our language. We were not allowed to speak Hocak. All the teachers there and the staff that were there all spoke English. And they expected us to speak English. I was caught one time speaking to one of my friends, one of my classmates. I was caught speaking English. I was speaking Hocak. And as such, I was taken downstairs to the boiler room, and I was spanked. And I didn't know what I had done, to deserve such punishment. My parents never touched me. My uncle never touched me, never punished me in that fashion. I was verbally reprimanded many times, for some wrongdoings that I did. But I was never physically, I never suffered any corporal punishment. So I thought that I must have done something very wrong, for me to be punished that way. So after that, I didn't say a word. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't talk to them in Hocak or anything. It was a couple weeks later that my parents come to visit. And if anybody knows how mothers can be, mothers are pretty perceptive. They're very observant. And she asked me what was wrong. And I told her, nothing, Mom. Everything's okay. And I don't know, my father went somewhere. He went to do something, and then finally my mother sat me down and very sternly said, what's wrong? And I was afraid to tell her, that I had been spanked, because I figured that I had done something grossly wrong. And I think we all know that we suffer double jeopardy when we're children. We may get, punished at school, or we may get punished somewhere, but that doesn't compare to the punishment that we get from our parents when we get home. So I told them what happened. And my mother was very upset. And when my father came back, she told my father. And my father took that teacher down to the boiler room and he punished him. And then they took me out of school, needless to say. And I went to excuse me, but I went to an all-white school. I didn't speak a word of English. I was talking earlier, to some people from here, and I said, I admire the teacher that I had, because the teacher taught me the things that I needed to know, to pass first grade. But I think her biggest accomplishment was teaching me English. Because I think about it, and back in that time, we didn't have what we have available today. We have courses at the university. I think there's even degrees that are offered, for teaching English as a second language. At the time, I don't know what type of training my teacher had, but she must have did something, because she moved me right along. I got through first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, graduated grade school, went to high school, graduated high school, went to the University of Wisconsin, and eventually graduated from there. And whatever. And then I joined the Navy, and I was in the Navy for 6 years. I got out of the Navy, went back to school, got my master's degree, and then I went to medical school at the University of New Mexico. And I graduated from there, and then I served with the Indian Health Service for 30 years, and then I retired from there. And all through getting the education, the white education that I got, I always remembered, the things that my grandfather taught me, the things that he used to say to me. It's my feeling that our language is our culture. And if you're to understand any culture at all, I think it's important, that we know the language and that we understand the language. How many of you in here are bilingual? Raise your hands, please. There's a few people in here bilingual. Are there any people that are trilingual? That know more than? There's somebody that raised their hand there. Anybody that's quadrilingual? So we have mostly people that speak one language, and I'm going to assume that language is English. We have bilingual speakers and a couple trilingual speakers and whatever. And if you think about it, in the modern world, most of our views, our opinions, our thoughts, are all in English. Because that's what we've learned. That's what we've learned in school. That's what we've learned. Whatever course of knowledge that we're seeking. Those of us that are bilingual oftentimes have two different views, two different worldviews of things. I definitely have two different worldviews of everything. I was just talking to someone not long ago, and I told him, I said, I'm educated. I'm educated in your world, and I'm proud of that. I said, but I'm also educated as a Hocak, and I'm more proud of my Hocak education than I am of anything else. I know, I have learned, I've been taught, what my ancestors knew. And hopefully, I retain that. I've passed that knowledge on to my children. And I do have grandchildren now, that I try to pass that knowledge on to. But first of all, I've taught them Hocak. And they're Hocak speakers. And in this day and age, it's rare for someone my children's age to speak the language. It's even rarer for my grandchildren to speak the language, because my youngest grandchildren are teenagers. My older ones are in their early 20s. And now I have a great-grandchild. And how that's going to go, I don't know. I hope that they're able to speak Hocak and learn from my sons, learn from my daughter, and learn from myself. Because we have a different worldview of things and how things go. An event can happen. And I take a look at it and say, okay. And then I think about my grandfather and the teachings and the thoughts that we have in our culture. And I think, okay. And I really can't say which one is right, but I think more of our culture, and I think our worldview is proper, more proper than anything else. When God created this world, He looked upon the world and saw how it was. And He took one of the hair from His scalp, and He threw it. He threw it on earth. And from that hair, all the grass that we see, all the greenery that we see was raised. And He thought that it was good. He looked more, and again He pulled out one of His hair, and He threw it, and it landed on the earth. And from that hair, the trees that we see, the shrubbery, all the trees that we see in this world, started to grow. And He thought, that is good. What I have done is good. So He went on and created the creatures in the sky, the birds, those that are primarily up in the air. He created all of them. And then He created the four-legged creatures, the creatures that are on the ground, that wander around on the ground. And then He created the creatures that are under the ground. And He created the creatures that are under the water. All these beings that He created were able to communicate with one another. The trees have souls. The trees are able to communicate with one another. The shrubs, the bushes, the grass. We were talking about grass not too long ago. And they're all able to communicate with one another. And if we think about it, this is what I tell everybody. We're all grounded. We all have our base on the earth. And through those means, we're able to communicate with one another. My ancient relatives were able to communicate with the trees, with the bushes, with the animals. And the animals were able to communicate among themselves, in their own language. So I take a look at this, and I think of all those creatures and his creations. I think of them as being superior to us, because they were created first. And if I feel that way, I honor them. I honor them and I respect them. And I think that view is starting to come around when we see all of our conservationists and people that I guess might be labeled tree huggers. Whatever. God finally decided that he'd create man. And he took a portion of his body and he formed man. And he placed him on earth. And he spoke to him. And man didn't move. He just stood there. And God took a look at him and wondered what was going on. And he saw that man had no ears, kind of like our children. So he created ears. And he spoke to him again. And man just looked around, he looked up, but he didn't say anything. He realized someone was talking to him. And he looked up, and God looked upon his creation a little bit closer and saw that he had no mouth. So he created a mouth for him. And he gave him a mouth. And again, God spoke to him, but man didn't answer. So upon closer inspection, God saw that he had no tongue. So he created a tongue for him. And again, he spoke to him. But man still didn't answer. Upon closer inspection, he saw that man had no breath. He had no breathing. So God formed his lungs and everything that's attached to that. And then he spoke to man. And man spoke back to him. And it's been said that when they spoke to one another, they were speaking Hocak. Hocak. That's the name that we have given ourselves. There's different translations, for our name Hocak, Hochangra. Some people say it means the big voice, the great voice. It could mean that. There's another translation that's Ho Wakanchunk, the holy voice. And I think that's the one that I choose. I choose to believe, that our voices are holy. I've been taught that our voices are the biggest weapon that we have. We're told never to make a fist and hit someone. We're never supposed to look upon someone angrily. And I've been told that if you really want to hurt somebody, use this. You use your mouth and your language. You can hurt someone in ways that you would not believe. And that is the biggest weapon, that we have. And it doesn't need to be the biggest weapon. We can use our voices in praise. We can use our voices, to convey happiness, joy, all of those. But it just takes one bad word, and we can hurt people like you would not believe. And those are the things that were taught to me by Grandpa. After he created man, he looked down, and everything seemed to be good. So he sat back and he rested for a little bit, and then he looked down on earth again, and he saw man looking skyward, and he was crying. And so God asked him, "What's wrong? What's wrong, my child?" And man told him, "I'm lonely. I'm lonesome. I'm the only being here." So God thought about it for a while and said, "Well, man is right." So again, he took a portion of his body and he formed a woman. And he sent the woman down to stand next to the man. And then he taught them. He took them and he told them, this is the way things will be. This is how I want things to go. So he thought things would be all right, and he looked down on earth and saw that there were more people. I'm cutting this story short. It gets a little redundant after a while that there was one house, two house, three house, four house, 2 villages, 3 villages, 4 villages, and so forth. But man began to populate the world. And as time went on, different languages came about. They look at our Hocak language, and they call it Siouan. And I resent that. I resent that greatly, because the base language for the Siouan tribes is Hocak. Hocak was the original language, and that there are some, that will agree with me that's it. They tell us that our Garden of Eden, our origin, is to the east of us, on the area along Lake Michigan. It's called Red Bank, and that's where we originated. And then from there we moved to the north, we moved to the south, and we moved to the west. And from what I understand, we went as far as St. Louis in our travels. At one time, back in the 1800s, there was a gathering. There were some anthropologists that came from the east and gathered a number of tribes down in the Omaha area. And among them, there were the different branches of the Sioux. There was the Punkah, Omaha, the Ho-Chunks, Otos, Caddos, Kiowas, Comanches, Apaches. And one of the questions that they asked the people, to ask different people, where you are living now, have you always lived there? And a vast majority of them said, no, we come from Red Bank. So there are many other tribes there that acknowledged, that they came from the Ho-Chunk, and that the languages were similar, and we could, we speak to one another. There are several languages that are Ho-Chunk based that I can understand. I don't speak it very well, but I have a very good understanding of it. My grandfather, and my grandmother, paternal grandmother and grandfather, and my father spoke Sioux. They spoke Sioux fluently. I don't know why my father is the one that was able to do that, but understandably, my grandfather and grandmother were very fluent in it. And I don't know, again, like I said, I don't know why my father was that way, because none of my other fathers were, they understood Sioux, but Lakota, but they didn't speak it. And then one of my aunts was able to speak Lakota also, and she understood it. Language is our culture. There are so many teachings that we have that are in our language only. There are some things that we can say in our language, that you can't translate. You really can't translate into English, because there's really no equivalent and whatever. So when I do I won't say in Hocak teaching, but when I do teach, when I teach my children, my grandchildren, I use the Hocak language. There may be some words that they don't understand, but then they stop and they ask me, well, Choka, what does that mean? What is that supposed to mean? So I have to stop and explain to them, what that word means, and how it's used and why it's used that way, and whatever. And there's a difference between male and female talk. I speak primarily as a male because I am a male. I do understand the females when they speak, but I don't know why they speak that way, and that there are certain words that they use that I have really no knowledge of, and I don't pretend to know, or I don't want to know either, because like I said, that's their world, that's their realm. It's not mine, and whatever. So I don't say anything. There's things that I don't say to my daughter, that her mother, does her educating. She's educated my daughter in that fashion, and in my fashion, I've educated my sons. It used to be that grandfathers took their grandchildren, their grandsons, when they were very, very young, and raised them. That's what I can say about myself, because my grandfather took me and started raising me. And my father has told me stories about himself and my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather taught my father many things, and there's stories that he's told that are rather humorous, for things that they did, and the things that were said, and how things were done. But I can say this, and I say it proudly, I am a Hocak. I am a Hocak male. I am a Hocak veteran. And having said all of that, I have a special place in our tribe, because of that, because of my being a male, because of my being a veteran. In my tribe, it's often said that our leaders come from our clan. I'm a member of the Thunder clan, and they tell us that the chiefs of the tribe came from the Thunder clan. But Grandpa used to always tell me, don't go around and say, I'm the chief. Don't go around and say that. He said, because it's a very difficult life to live. It's a very difficult life to live as a chief. Your job is not to govern the people, but to oversee their well-being. If somebody comes up to you and say, I have no place to live, and, you move out of your home, your abode, and you say, here's your place to live. Or if they say, I have no food, you procure food and put it in front of them and give it to them and say, well, here's your food. You'll be okay. So no matter what they ask of you or ask about, you provide it for them. And whatever. And I don't think there's, any form of government that I've ever seen that, that has done that. And unfortunately, we've gotten away from that, in modern times. And I think we'd be much better off if we went back to that. But again, like I say, it's difficult, very difficult life to pursue and to live and whatever. And I'm not able to do it. I wouldn't be able to do that. That's why you'll never hear me say, I'm the chief. I cannot live up to the expectations and the the responsibilities of being the leader of the people. I do, what I can. But again, language is what holds us together. We come all the way from my grandparents, who spoke no English. We come to my parents. My parents became bilingual out of necessity. And then you come to my generation, and again, we're bilingual, out of necessity. I've been classified as an eminent speaker, and there's very few of us left that are considered to be eminent speakers. Because eminent speakers were those of us that started first grade and couldn't speak a word of English. There's a few of us in our tribe, that still have that. Most of us, we younger ones are approaching 80. I'm 78. I just had a birthday last week. I'm 78 years old, and my peers are in that age range too, 78, 80 years old. And we're going to be the last of the eminent speakers because there are no children now that speak Hocak, and Hocak only. I was asked, how are things going to be in 20 years? I would like to think that in the future, because of the efforts that we are making now, that our language will carry on. We have a language program, but sometimes it seems like it's in there's no progress being made. At one time, language program was shut down, because of the COVID, the lack of funds. At that time, I had six apprentices, that I was teaching Hocak. Had been teaching them for about 6 months, and we're making good progress. And if our apprentice program continues, I think that that we will continue to produce fluent speakers, because I see them from time to time, and I speak Hocak to them, and they surprise me by being able to answer me back. And I find out that they self-study and that they get together themselves and speak Hocak to one another, and help each other learn that way. And I think they're very motivated in what they're doing, and their belief in, continuing with our language. So hopefully our language will survive and move into the future. Any questions? Okay? Yes.
If the Hocak language is becoming an issue with the younger generations, how do you see it affecting the culture?
Like I said, language is our culture. If we lose our language, we lose our culture. My grandfather once said, when our language is no more, and when our language is no more, that's the end of our world, is what he said. I guess we can take a look at it a couple different ways. Does he mean the end of the world, like, that's it, apocalypse and, all this other stuff? And I think not. There's many places I've traveled in the United States, and I've seen language loss there. I've seen them, a loss of their culture. To me, they're natives in name only. For me, and I may be wrong, but if you were to tell me, I'm Anishinaabe, I'd say, fine. Do you speak Anishinaabe? If you don't, to me, you're not Anishinaabe. Someone mentioned, I won't mention any names, but somebody mentioned 11 federally recognized tribes. Excuse my language, but people don't realize how much that pisses me off. I'm Hocak. Ain't nobody going to tell me that I'm not a Hocak. I don't need a card that federally recognizes me as being a Hocak. It feels like we're being registered like animals. And still you see people, well, you're only half Hocak. You're a quarter Hocak. You're less than a quarter. You're not a Hocak. And to me, that's bull. Because you can learn. You can learn our culture, learn our language. Even you can. And once you did that, I'd say, you're a Hocak. Okay? Answer your question? Yes, sir.
Is there any form of written, I think I can project pretty well. Is there any form of written version of Hocak, or would that be a way of preserving it? Is it possible to write it down?
That's a good question. Again, someone asked me this earlier, and I said, we've had a written form of Hocak for years, but hardly anyone knows it. Okay, when the language program started, and there was a joint meeting between the Hocaks here in Wisconsin and the Hocaks in Nebraska, they decided that they would adapt the International Phonetic Alphabet. So any of the written material that we have now is done in the IPA, and it's maintained that way. Now, that's not everything. There's so many, just like I was saying earlier, there's so many stories that we have, that aren't written, nor will they ever be written. Someone asked me not long ago, why don't you write these down, Andy? And I said, no, I won't. I refused to. It wasn't written for me. Whatever, so. So yes, there is a form of written Hocak now. Yes, sir.
So you'd mentioned that women and men have different language, or that they is it different words, different grammar, both?
A different lexicon.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just structured differently. Yeah, I used to think it was funny because there used to be a man in in Nebraska that was raised by his grandmothers, and he spoke like a woman.
So if I could share something. So I didn't count myself as being bilingual, which my French teacher at this university would probably be a little disappointed to hear me say that. But one of the things about when I learned French is I learned only from women. And I was told later by some native speakers that I spoke with a woman's inflection, that my voice was raised an octave. So it's interesting to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you understand what I mean. I think some of us that are bilingual know that. That's like when I learned Vietnamese and I went to Vietnam. Everybody would laugh, and I'd kind of go, that's okay. They understand what I'm saying, and I understand them, and I finally became friends with someone, and I got to know him fairly well. And I asked him, I said, why does everybody laugh when I speak Vietnamese? And he laughed. He said, you talk like somebody from the north. And I thought about it, and then later on I found out that the highly educated people were from the north. Yeah, so they were, so what I had learned was formal, very, very formal Vietnamese. So I think when they talk about, formal, they're talking about, Hanoi and, places up there that were noted for their universities and those type way, those places that were. But by the time I left Vietnam, I was down to the nitty-gritty.
Do you find it disrespectful, or would you rather have, like, us white people learn your language and your culture and to practice it, or would you prefer us not to?
What was the question?
Would you prefer people who are not Ho-Chunk to learn your language and your culture and to practice it, or would you find that disrespectful?
You'll have to excuse me, okay? Because I'll never teach a white person. I'm sorry, but that's the way I am. I have never had a white student, nor will I ever have a white student. That's my own prejudices, okay? How do I feel about it? If they truly want to learn our language, if they truly want to learn our culture, I'm in favor of it, but I'm not going to do it. It's not going to be me that does it. I'm all in favor of that. And I think about, why do we learn another language? What's our purpose of learning another language? I learned Spanish because all my paternal aunts married Mexicans, and that's all that they spoke. So I ended up speaking Spanish. I learned Vietnamese out of necessity, because I was sent to Vietnam. And to do the job that I had, I needed to speak Vietnamese. And we were out in the village one time, and I was really surprised one of the sergeants that was with us was speaking to an older man, and they were speaking French. You know, and I kind of cocked my head off to the side for a little bit and listened to them, and then later on I had the realization that, yeah, French would have been spoken in Vietnam, you know, because it was French Indochina, you know, before it became Vietnam. So it's understandable why French was spoken there. Yes, sir.
Don't want to hog them, but I had a Cheyenne instructor myself, and were you exposed or aware of the sign language that was universal among tribes?
About
the hand signs?
The what?
The hand sign language, just talking with your hands. Apparently for trade and, you know, intercultural.
I'm assuming that it was there. I don't know.
You didn't?
No, I don't. I'm not aware of it. I used to know the ABCs, you know, and I did take a couple courses in sign language while I was in undergraduate. My undergraduate degree was in speech pathology, so it was understandable that I.
And one last question.
Well, there was one over here.
Oh, one over here too.
How do you think people who are in environmental conservation should work with the indigenous people on the land near them in order to better create the land's like prosperity?
What's the question?
So like a lot of people are getting involved, a lot of environmental conservation people want to reach out to indigenous people and like, you know, go back to how they worked with the land. So like, is there anything from either your experience or your tribe's experience that would be beneficial to like the land or where you're from the Red Bank?
I'm going to answer your question, and I hope you don't think that I'm hedging on it, okay?
Okay.
I'm a member of the Thunderclan. Thunderclan is from above, okay? There's 6 clans that reside in the upper Phratry, okay? And then there's 6 clans that reside in the lower Phratry. Things that happen on the earth or with the earth are not any of my responsibility. Okay, so I can answer your question and say, ooh.
Okay.
Now, if I were a member of, you know, the Bear Clan or the Buffalo Clan or the Fish Clan, you know, I'd have an answer for you, but.
So I know you had mentioned about having the grandchildren and having your own daughter. So were you the person that taught your daughter the language, or did a woman in the family teach them? Because there's the 2 separate.
Both her mother and I both taught her Hocak.
So I grew up in a very small town where my father used to teach agriculture. He was a professor there at a university. But then we moved out when I was about 12 years old, out of that town to a bigger city. And after I was in my mid-20s, I visited that place again. I had some good memories of a big tree that was located at our residence. And that tree was still there. And I had a feeling that tree is saying, why you left us? Why you left me? And you are visiting me after such a long time? So you mentioned in the story that you were sharing that trees also speak and all that. Do you feel sometimes that you can speak to trees or they speak to you? You have that feeling sometimes?
There are certain times and certain trees that we use in our ceremonies. And before we take them to use them, we have a tobacco offering and speak to them and tell them that we're going to take them and we're going to use them for this sacred occurrence, you know, that we're going to and that's where they're going to be used, and that they, should give themselves up with grace. Yeah, so if you want to take a look at that as being communicating with them, that's the way we communicate with them. There are certain people that have the ability, to hear things. When they're out in the woods, whether it's a tree that's speaking to them or acknowledging them in some fashion. The only experience I ever had was when I was out in the woods. One time I heard two deer talking to one another. That was the only experience I've ever had with non-humans, communicating with one another.
Thank you.
And I think that's probably a good place to end it.